Yet another Starfield review. Am I right? But this one is going to be a bit different. This one is going to be honest, politically unbiased, and a non-sponsored review by a gamer of a game. So let's do it. In the sea of sponsored and unsponsored Starfield reviews and how-tos, if you still haven't decided if you should or not buy a copy of this game, hopefully this review will help you with that decision. I have to say this at the start, this video is not one of those sponsored reviews, and that is why I'm this late to the party. I didn't even get a review copy of this game, even though some much smaller channels have. If anything, I've spent $100 to get a premium copy of the game so I can play it on September the 1st, so I can stream it to my viewers on YouTube and Twitch. And now, after 70+ hours spent in the game and no lifing the shit out of it for a week straight, I can tell you this. Starfield is a jack of all trades but a master of none. But let me explain. The gunplay is okay, but it isn't as good as the one found in Tarkov. The sound effects during combat are good, but it doesn't sound as realistic as Squad does. There is no seamless transitioning between spaceflight and atmospheric flight like in Star Citizen. In fact, there is no atmospheric flight at all, and it's all done by cutscenes and loading screens. The universe is big, but not as expansive as the one in Elite Dangerous. Ship building is fun, but it's not like you're playing Space Engineers. Outpost building is cool, but it's no satisfactory. Salvaging, if you can even call it that, is not up to the hard space shipbreaker standards. The story is not as captivating as the one told in Red Dead Redemption 2. The graphics are good, but overall they're not as good as the graphics of Cyberpunk 2077. It's an open world game, but it has a metric ton of loading screens. Most of the characters do not have a compelling backstory like the characters in The Last of Us, except maybe these two characters here. Ship-to-ship combat isn't as fun as the one found in Star Wars Squadrons. The flight mechanics are as arcadey as it can get, and in the end, the survival aspect of the game isn't as refined as the one found in DayZ. But Starfield still tries doing all of that and so much more. But for some reason, it doesn't have spacewalking, which is a bit weird for a space game, right? But does it deliver? Well, in short, if you're expecting an open-world space simulation game, no, it doesn't. But if you're expecting an immersive story-driven RPG that is set in space, then you're in for a treat. But you also need to know that it is very flawed. Without spoiling the story, it is obvious that Starfield is heavily inspired by the Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Firefly, Star Trek, Stargate, and Alien movies universes. And somehow it successfully combines them into a new and untold story. Don't get me wrong, there are no Jedi or Sith in the Starfield universes, but you can use similar powers once you progress through the main story. There are no Cylons, but you can see that the Battlestar Galactica was the inspiration behind the UC Navy. There are no aliens on your ship, but you can see that the Terramorphs were obviously inspired by the Alien movies. There is no Serenity, but it's obvious that the whole Freestar Collective was inspired by the Firefly series. Even the music score with the use of the national guitar and the Western fiddle supports my claim. Even your original ship is called the Frontier, and since it's an exploration game, it is an obvious nod to the Star Trek universe. So all in all, the universe that Bethesda made in this game is not only beautiful, but it's also super immersive and full of potential. Now let's start talking about the pros and the cons, and let me tell you about all of the flaws of this game, but also all the things this game does right. The most important part of any game is obviously the gameplay, so we will start with that. Starfield tries to sell you the impression of an open world, no boundaries game, but the planets are a series of different maps with invisible walls on them, which is weird for an exploration game, especially after huge open world games such as Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen, and No Man's Sky. But honestly, it isn't really an issue. I have never hit any of the invisible walls, and I have had a lot of fun exploring the planets and the moons around the Milky Way. Honestly, I had much more fun exploring in this game than in games like Star Citizen or No Man's Sky. So even though there are boundaries, you really don't feel restricted in any way. If anything, the thing that annoys me the most is the lack of ground vehicles, because the maps are so big and you need a lot of time and a ton of pressure on that W key to do all the things that are required from you for the mission. Especially considering that instead of having a stamina bar, Bethesda thought that they should make a new mechanic which kills you if you run for too long. Hopefully the next DLC will add an all-terrain vehicle to the game, so it will make our lives easier. The gunplay varies from terrible to okay. Granted, it's an RPG game, but it's 2023, and if you're a AAA studio releasing an FPS game, there are some set expectations that need to be met for the gunplay to be enjoyable. Your character will reload his gun without any urgency, even though you're being attacked by hordes of aliens or pirates. In the early game, most of the NPCs are just gonna be bullet sponges, but with leveling your skill points up and getting better guns, it gets a bit better, until you encounter high-level NPCs and then you feel like you just started playing the game again. Loading is great and is done by a single press of a button, but the inventory management is horrendous. The economy system in Starfield is weird, and most vendors don't have enough money to buy all the stuff you looted or mined. So you should honestly only grab the things you'll need and discard the rest. Speaking of economy, I don't want to be nitpicky, but the mission givers will give you weird amounts of credits for the quests that you finished. As an example, without spoiling the story, one NPC will give you 3,000 credits for doing a complex mission for him where you had to kill hordes of NPCs. But on the other hand, you will get the same amount of credits for 10 seconds of walking and delivering welfare to a poor family. And just to put this into perspective, a habitation module for your ship can cost 3,000 credits. Like, what the f? The ship combat and flight mechanics are very basic, and they are as arcadey as it can get. Honestly, my initial reaction was that Star Wars Battlefront 2 had ship-to-ship combat that was more fun. Also, there is no HOTAS or dual joystick support, and the strangest thing is that there is no support for any of the types of head tracking, such as Toby or Track IR5, which is so weird for a space game that has ship-to-ship combat in it and a bunch of beautiful cockpit interiors that are just amazing to look at. Yes, it's an RPG, but like, come on, Division 2 has Toby eye tracking support, even though it doesn't have to. It's also an RPG, and it's like a MMO or whatever, but like, it's not a flight sim, but it still has it, like, come on. The rest of the gameplay is just like the flight mechanics are. It is very rudimentary. Mining is not a minigame, you basically point your mining tool at a mineable rock and hold left click until it pops. Which is okay, but since you don't get that many resources out of it, it becomes very boring very quickly. Outpost building mechanics are also very basic, and there is no way of extending the area of your outpost, at least no way that I know of, which means that you will need to make several outposts on the same map just to cover all the resources that you can mine, which also means that you will need to make the same assets over and over again to connect those outposts. And making these is very tedious because all of the resources need to be stored in your personal inventory for you to build, but those resources are heavy and you will be encumbered the whole time. So with the lack of the stamina bar and the oxygen draining mechanics that Bethesda thought were good, making outposts can be a pain in the ass. Speaking of outpost building, there is almost no reason to make them. There is only a few side missions that require a large amount of resources to be delivered to the mission giver. Other than that, you can just go through the whole game without making a single outpost. Shipbuilding and customization is fun and the ship interiors look amazing, but the only issue I have here is that the game itself decides how to connect all the hubs you have used in your ship, and with each addition it can completely change the layout of the interior of your ship, and with some complex designs your ship's interior layout will start feeling like a forever changing maze. And in the end, to round up the whole gameplay section, there is way too many loading screens and cutscenes, which is most apparent in places like Neon, where basically every door is a loading screen. In certain cases, a one-room store also requires you to load that level too, which makes you feel like you're playing a game from the late 2000s. So all in all, my main issue with the gameplay mechanics is that it's obvious that the game was made for the Xbox console, and it feels like it was ported to PC, which is just terrible. So in the end, Starfield's gameplay gets 6.5 grumplings out of 10. And yes, I'm scoring with grumplings. Deal with it. Now let's talk about the graphics. The game is just gorgeous. It is very aesthetically pleasing. The color filter adds to the immersion and I simply love it. Of course, there's a mod that will remove the color filter for you if you really have no taste. This is one of the most detailed games that I have played in a while when it comes to the textures, the lighting, and the visual effects, until you look at the faces of the NPCs. That, coupled with the hideous animations and the overall bugginess of the NPCs, the game really makes you take the trip down the memory lane where you were winding up your cassettes with a pencil like a Neanderthal. Seriously, the faces and the facial animations are that bad. LA Noire from 2011 has better facial animations and details on the characters' faces. We have all seen how bad they are in the trailers, but once you spend some time in the game, since it's a story-driven game, and with all the issues that the AI has, encounters with so less NPCs can go from immersion-breaking to a series of hilarious events that will leave you on the floor laughing your ass off. Understood.
Good. Let's take a little stroll through New Atlantis, shall we?
I guess every fucking space game has to have NPCs standing on chairs.
Excited by the artifacts, but we need to be as objective as possible and
I guess that's just how it works. So overall, even though the textures on spacesuits are great, that lighting is amazing, and planets and moons and the ship interiors look really good, because so much of the game is spent in dialogues, Bethesda can only get 6 out of 10 grumblings for the graphics. Now let's talk about the story and the storytelling. While the story itself is very good, and the things that you can learn throughout the game about the universe of Starfield are just immersive and amazing, the way the story is told is borderline idiotic. Since I don't want to spoil the story for you, I will just tell you how the game starts. You are a deadbeat miner on a moon and you are contracted to find a priceless artifact. And then a guy that you just met gives you his ship and tells you to deliver the priceless artifact to his friends. There is nothing wrong with the guy. He just felt like giving his ship and the priceless artifact to a dude that he just met was a good idea for some reason. Like, come on, if a story starts like that, you know that it can only get worse. And it gets worse. If you choose to apply to the UC Navy, the first mission takes you straight to the door of the President of the United Colonies, and suddenly you're the guy that decides everything. And in the end, whatever you decide in most of the missions doesn't really seem to have an effect on the world around you. On the other hand, most NPCs that you will meet don't have a compelling backstory, except maybe a couple of them because you can have some good conversations with them. But the side quest NPCs that you will encounter during your endeavors simply don't have a good enough backstory, and when they seem like they do, the story goes literally nowhere. The dialogue is mostly deceptively shallow, meaning there are no wrong or right answers, and whatever you do, the outcome would basically be the same. And the things you think will impact the universe the most basically do nothing for the universe. And all in all, even though the way the story is presented to the player is pretty bad, the story behind the Starfield universe is really good, and it makes you want to know everything, even though that would mean that you would need to talk to more of the soulless NPCs that are just dead inside. The overall story of Starfield sparks that sense of wonder inside you and reawakens that kid inside of you that always wanted to be a space explorer. So because the storytelling is bad and the delivery is even worse, but the overall story is not that bad, I can only give Starfield 6 out of 10 grumblings for the story. Speaking of the NPCs that are dead inside, we should probably talk about the AI, but there is not that much to talk about. The AI behavior is also pretty bad. They will constantly talk over each other, so you can't hear neither of the NPCs that you're trying to hear. The pathfinding is horrendous, and your NPC companions will always get stuck in terrain or on obstacles such as chairs, tables, or railings. And it becomes hilarious when you talk to them and they can't choose between two animations, or they're just stuck in an awkward spot. It's the same with the enemies. They react to you like you're playing a game from the mid-2000s. They rarely try flanking you, and even if they do, I believe it's not because they're coded to do that, but it just happened to be the closest route to you. So it feels like it's just a soulless A without the I. So without spending any more time on the broken AI, I'm giving them 4 out of 10 grumblings for whatever this is, because it is only artificial and it's not intelligent at all. And this is me being generous, so Bethesda should be happy. Now, since it's predominantly an RPG game, let's talk about the RPG mechanics. The progression progression feels solid and the perks that you need to unlock are great. Some are more overpowered than the others, but they're all very useful. And other than exploration, this is the thing that will keep you playing this game even after you finish all the main and the side quests. Once you hit level 30, you start feeling like an NPC boss yourself. If you get attacked by pirates or bounty hunters that could have posed a threat in the early game, once you get to a higher level, you will mow them down in a matter of seconds. And it feels great and very rewarding. But it is not revolutionary in any way. If anything, it's almost the same progression system that we have seen in the Fallout series. Bethesda has it in the bag when it comes to this, but since they're known for making good RPG games and some that are not so good, and since there is nothing revolutionary to it, I can only give them up to 7 out of 10 grumblings for the RPG mechanics. Now, in the end, being a music producer and a sound engineer and a composer myself, I know that sound and music can make or break the game. But the sound in Starfield is pretty good overall. The engines of your ship sound amazing and pretty realistic. The ambient sounds on planets and on points of interest are excellent, but some gun sounds are just bad compared to the newer games, which in the end just makes the bad gunplay even worse. Now, the composer in me was very skeptical about the music in Starfield. By now, we all know that 3-note melody that makes the Starfield theme so great. And it is just 3 notes. Before I even played the game, I thought that this simplistic yet exciting and wondrous melody will be overused. And I was scared of that, because that would mean that we would get sick of it pretty fast. And even though you can hear it everywhere in the score, it is there to accentuate certain things that the player is doing. It simply embellishes the underlying score whenever you can hear it. The rest of the soundtrack is amazing, and it's there just to play a supporting role to whatever is happening on the screen. So what I'm saying is that the soundtrack's composer obviously wasn't going for that Star Wars vibe where every faction and every main character has a strong and memorable melody. On the contrary, it is there to make whatever is on the screen feel more alive and exciting, and it's also there to get you more immersed into the whole feeling of being a space explorer. So in the end, when it comes to the sound effects, I will be generous and give them 7 out of 10 grumblings, but for the music in this one, they're easily getting 9 out of 10 grumblings. And a huge congratulations to the composer. So to finish up this review, all I have to say is that with all the issues that the game obviously has, it is a game that every true space nerd should experience for themselves. None of the loading screens, dumb and buggy NPCs or map boundaries kept me from wanting to play this game more. And I can tell you that I can't wait to finish this video so I can hop back into it. Because as I've said, it has reawakened that child in me that always wanted to be a space explorer. And that's the most important thing, at least for me. And in time, with mods and DLCs, I'm certain that this game will get even better, and that it will have even more replayability than it already has, because the game is full of potential. The only thing that I'm really sad about is that it's not a multiplayer game. Even though the game has some replayability to it, as it already has a ton of random encounters with NPCs and whatnot, but if it was a multiplayer game, and even if it was just co-op, with all the issues that it has, it would have the potential to be the game of the year for 2023. Not only that, it would ensure that we will be playing this game for the years to come, because who doesn't want to build an outpost or a ship with their friends, or trade with other players, or fight against them in their overpowered ships? But unfortunately for the space nerds, the Xbox owners, and the Bethesda fans, the Game of the Year prize is most certainly going to Baldur's Gate 3. I would also like to see the game unlocked for the PC platform, because there is little to no reason to have this many loading screens and cutscenes on PC, especially considering that you can fly from one planet to the other without using your graph drive or going into a cutscene. It is obscene that a PC game this big in 2023 has a loading screen every few steps that a player takes. So my final overall score for the whole game, with all the things considered, can't be more than 6.5 out of 10 grumblings. And this is not me even being hard on them, I'm just being realistic here. I'm sick and tired of AAA studios like Bethesda releasing unpolished games with a ton of potential that are so promising yet so heartbreaking because they're not up to today's standards. So hopefully Bethesda will not waste this game's potential. But that is it for today, guys. I hope you liked the review. If you did, leave a like and tell me if you like it and if you want me to do any how-tos like the other YouTube channels are doing and all of that. Leave a subscribe and all of that. Also follow me on Twitch, GrumpyEyeTV, if you want to see me streaming. I'm also streaming on this channel here, and yeah, I have another channel. Like, there's a lot of shit that, like, just go into the down there and you can see everything down there and like all the links and everything. But yeah, I also have to thank my patrons. You guys are amazing. I love you guys. If you want to become a patron, there's a link down below in the description of the video where all the other links are. There's like a join button on YouTube, etc, etc. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do if you want to support me. Like, you know how it works at YouTube. But yeah, that's it. And don't forget to bring it someone when you're traveling through space. And mwah, bye.
I have a really important question for you. Do you know the way to Uranus?
Oh, Jesus Christ, this joke.
I sure hope so. It's right behind you. Smell you later.
Jesus fucking Christ.